Mr. Hari wears a phenomenal number of hats, as you will see. He's an author, he's an angel investor, he's an advisor to VCs, a mentor at startup accelerators. He's a sounding board to founders and startups. He's a columnist. He has the most powerful three-letter combination a person can have. He's an IIT grad. He's the author of Say No to Jugaad, The Making of Big Basket. He's co-authored 6 books and has 4 more in the pipeline. And maybe he should start the session with how he manages his time so well. So, Mr. Hari, one question I will definitely have for you is, at the end of the session, I am looking at you to help me answer this. Should I leave my job today and jump into this beautiful world of entrepreneurship, or should I go back to my ugly boss and keep worship him on Monday morning? So all over to you.
Great. Thank you, Sandeep and Pooja. Welcome, everyone. I think it's such a privilege moderating this panel. We have 3 amazing individuals. So let me just briefly introduce them, I think, before I dive into asking them some very interesting questions. So first is, we have Rahul Chandra. I've known Rahul for almost 10 years. I think he started off as a VC, in the last centuries, sometime in 1996 in the US in Silicon Valley. But he was also one of the first venture capitalists in India. He was one of the co-founders of Helion, along with Sanjeev Agarwal and Kavaljit Singh. And the other 2 are, Sidharth Rao and Karthik. Both these I have known for a very short period, precisely 10 days. And they are absolutely amazing individuals. I've not met many people like them so far. I think both of them are extremely young, very accomplished. Not a surprise at all, therefore, that in the last 10 years, the progress that India has made on multiple fronts has been led by young individuals like them. So both of them, you will discover, are extremely interesting people. Sidharth was the founder of Webchutney, which was a digital agency that was acquired by Dentsu. Sidharth is now, building out Webchutney within Dentsu and also trying to figure out what should be his next big gig. He has a farm at Karjat, which is on the outskirts of Mumbai, and he has a fun time living there, and while he figures out what to do next. And Karthik is such an interesting person. When I got to listen to what he does and when I read about him, it was fascinating. He's an entrepreneur. He's a theater personality. He's a film actor. Can you believe it? He directs movies, acts in movies. He writes, scripts for movies. He's a stand-up comic. And now he's an author. He's written this wonderful book, which is, title is very provocative in some ways, which is Don't Start Up. But actually, it's not as provocative as it is, because in the process, he's advising people, would-be entrepreneurs, to be a little careful, thoughtful before they jump into entrepreneurship. He's warning them, that an entrepreneur's life is not a bed of roses. You need to be prepared for a bunch of things. And he's talking about all of that. It's a book that every entrepreneur, I think, should read. And this is the book, that Sidharth has written, which is how I, almost blew it, where he's met up with 15 wonderful companies and written their stories. And they're absolutely amazing stories. And I think you must read the other book by Rahul, which is The Moonshot Game. I'm just trying to get the book out. It's in a bunch of books. This is The Moonshot Game by Rahul. This is pretty much his own life journey, but it also has amazing lessons, for wannabe venture capitalists on what they should do, what they shouldn't do. And that's a very interesting book. So you have an amazing bunch of authors as well, and who have very interesting life stories. So Rahul, let me just begin with you. You were one of the first venture capitalists in India, and you continue to be a venture capitalist. So from 2006 to 2020, what has changed? Fundamentally, what is different?
My age has gone from 32 to 48. And I have gone from where, the entrepreneurs I would be meeting would be much older than me. And now our young analyst is probably, the age group at which most entrepreneurs come in at. So I think big decline in the course profile in who the startups are being founded by. It used to be a lot of corporate background folks in the beginning with very deep domain expertise in what they do. They knew one area really well. and they didn't have that much room to maneuver. So pivoting wasn't so much a thing at that time. And now it is, just first principles founders with strong tech backgrounds, picking a problem that they saw as a intern maybe, or as children growing up in a household, and they're building solutions around that which are completely left field, tangential, and that's it's an approach which is required for just creating completely new industry structures. You don't build incrementally; you're building just ground up, and M has become a B. So the dreams used to be counted in millions, and now it is counted in billions. So that's probably the biggest change. So we are also getting used to the ideas of, when we write our investment memos, our best case exit options used to be, this company is going to be worth 50 million. And now we are brave enough to say, no, this company can cost $1 billion as well.
Wow. That's very interesting. And the space is now also pretty crowded. So how do you differentiate yourself in such a crowded space?
Yeah, so when we started off with Helion in 2006, there were 6 firms that we could put on our PowerPoint presentation to our investors, saying, this is how the space is. And indeed, it was only those many options. There were very few angels. I mean, the word didn't exist. So an entrepreneur had to really struggle to actually get started, to get outside money. And now what it has become is like a barbell. So it's got lots and lots of sources for capital. So there are, I think, about 7,500 angel investors in India. Last count, this is an official count by Let's Venture. And of course, there are the beginnings of micro VC firms that are that are starting. So there are, if not hundreds, there are at least 30, 40 micro VC firms. So the number of options for entrepreneurs to get their first check, even if it's a 3 crore check or a 2 crore check, are countless. So you can imagine from 6, it has become, at least 1,000. So suddenly the democratization of where capital could come in from just allows for a lot of companies to start off. So what we are, again, as VC seeing is, we are seeing companies that have already raised capital from someone somewhere, and they have some runway to build, the product is built out, some customers have been acquired. And we used to be the only backers at our, back in 2006, we would do seed, series A, series B. There were very few people, and mostly VC firms would just keep funding their own companies. There was no cross fertilization because the pipeline wasn't big enough. There wasn't that much choice, and now there is a lot of cross fertilization happening. So we are looking at companies coming from micro VCs. Later funds are looking at companies that we would fund. So it's a nice runway, pathway, which is very well defined between which group of investors you should speak to at what time, and there are enough choices in those.
Great. So I'll come back to you, Rahul, with the question, how have Tiger and SoftBank changed the VC environment? But let me just go to Sidharth for a moment. So Sidharth, I think while reading your book, what stood out was that you said that the role of parents in an entrepreneur's success is often underrated. And I think you did talk about, the role that your parents played in such a big way that went into your success. Can you just talk a little bit about what role did they play? Who were your parents? What did they do? How did they help you?
Yeah, so I mean that was mostly. I mean, it was a dedication of, to in the book, and it was mostly personal. So yeah, right. I mean, they played a huge role, right from allowing me to drop out of college right after 3 months. I said I don't want to do this. Allowing me to take a what my dad jokingly used to call free boarding lodging approach to being an unpaid intern in one of the advertising agencies, so on and so forth. And then throughout Webchutney's success, I did have though ours is a simple cash and carry business. I mean, it's a services business, right? Yeah. But I was still stupid enough to make enough number of mistakes to get down to, because of some cowboy optimism or sheer stupidity, get down to near bankruptcy a couple of times, right? So even just cutting me 15 lakhs ka check or bailing me out and so on and so forth. Yeah, I mean, it was a huge role. I don't think Webchutney would have existed if my father and my mom weren't behind it, right?
Right. Great. And how did you come up with the theme, of this book, the title, How I Nearly Blew It? How did you come up with this theme? How did you go about finding the companies, identifying them, reaching out, writing about them?
So I kind of lucked out because I'm like dinosaur material, 2 decades in the business, right? Most of these guys were clients, or I'd known them, I'd met them in some forum or something like that. So it was easy to sort of reach out. In fact, I call it the laziest book ever written because it was just having freewheeling chats and just transcribing it to a great extent. And I had a fabulous editor who helped me sort of fix my English bit in that. So yeah, the reason I wrote on this subject is because there's one, to begin with, not too much has been written about startups in India. Most of it is generally either about great milestones like fundraising or about shutdown and layoffs or whatever, right? No one really, I thought, sort of dug deep into this nuance of the journey where, you can almost, and a couple of them have almost blown it a few times, right? And I had pondered in my safer services journey that, if I could blow it, almost blow it, I'm sure there are enough and more examples, right? So, for instance, a couple of these guys I knew, right? Like one of the Make My Trip founders is actually a very dear friend, and we started talking about how Make My Trip went through its highs and lows and stuff like that, and I realized that there's a pattern there, right? And and that's where the thought came.
Lovely. I'll come back to you with what were some of the most amazing lessons that were common across all these, but let me just go to Karthik. Karthik, I think such an amazing, diverse personality from being an entrepreneur. I think one thing that stands out about you is you had the courage to follow your passion. This is something that is written so much about, following your passion. But I think very few people are either courageous or lucky to follow a passion and still make a living out of it. So tell us your story, Karthik, very briefly. How do you do so many things and finally writing this book, from film scripts to screenplays to direction to writing a book to being an entrepreneur? Can you just tell us your story?
I think the approach was that if you're going to be in the artistic space, you're going to, at some level, not want to have too many people interfere with your artistic work. All right. And therefore, entrepreneurship was a logical option because here is where we can create an enterprise that can protect IP. All right. So that was the orientation towards entrepreneurship. Otherwise, you will end up being commissioned as an artist. And I saw a lot of my friends who were getting into the artistic space, entering into the advertising world, where a lot of their IP gets written off to clients. Right. So if you were to become an artist in the Indian scheme of things, it was more like you can moonlight as an artist unless you get discovered. And discovery is, there's a certain nepotism that works very, very positively in the artistic space. And if you're an independent artist, and especially when we started in early 2000, there was no concept of entrepreneurship in the art space. All right. So I think that was the orientation, saying how do we own our own IP? How do we put out work out there that whose artistic integrity we maintain? And therefore we had to learn we had to understand entrepreneurship and adopt it for ourselves, because that's the only way you can protect the artistic integrity is if you can protect the business integrity of it. So I think we came into entrepreneurship from a very middle class mindset where constantly people were telling us don't start up. Because startup was a word that was reserved for the likes of infotech companies and at that point of time early retail and enterprises. And I remember in 2009 when we were like the top 30 hottest startups by NEN, I think New Entrepreneurs Network, and the Tata NEN had this thing. We were the only artistic group in that entire top 30 list. And therefore, I think it was therefore, the book was therefore the knowledge and the pain that I have gone through. I want to share with as many people so that they can be well informed before they venture into their journey as an entrepreneur, because I think one of the main things you need to break or understand in your journey as an entrepreneur is to break that middle class thought process, which says there is a glass ceiling and this is enough. How do you define enough for yourself? For some people, enough may be financial, some people enough, maybe creative pursuit. How do you define it for yourself and therefore understand the entrepreneur you are? And I think that was the book. The book was largely telling a younger version of myself, hand-holding myself. I wish I had known all of these things when I started off, but I learned the hard way. And I think largely how not to fear failure, because we are taught that failure is somewhere we need to close shop and go back. But failure is one of the most intuitive ways in which human beings learn, because evolution we evolved because of failure. We evolved because we burnt our hands. We evolved because we desperately wanted to survive. So how can you get used to failure as seeing it as a stepping stone for progress, rather than seeing it as a death knell to go back and close shop? So I think that was largely the book, an empathetic book which said, I wish I had read this 15 years back. So that's where Don't Startup was born.
Lovely. So Karthik, you used a word, when you were speaking, called nepotism. I think I can't resist the temptation of asking you a little more about nepotism in the art world. Nepotism has suddenly become so notorious, in Bollywood, the topic is being discussed. So tell us a little bit. Most of us don't understand this well enough.
Oh, nepotism, I think you cannot blame the industry for nepotism. Nepotism is something that we as consumers, as audiences, celebrate, because we are waiting for Amitabh Bachchan's progeny to somewhere continue his legacy, so to speak. So it's that mindset that Indians have had over years, where the Raja's ka beta will become the next Raja. He never has to earn the privilege of becoming a Raja. And therefore, it's not really an industry culture. It's more of a people culture. Like, we do in the next generation want to know what will Flipkart's children want to become. I mean, I'm sure they're going to become young entrepreneurs. What is Freshworks? What is Girish's son going to do next? So it's that mindset from the consumer's perspective, saying "Iska beta kya banega, iski beti kya banegi," kind of thing. So it's nepotism is consumer reality entertainment right now. So it's we want to see their son fail, or we want to see their son succeed. Let's see how they do. So I think that,
and because they are so
that curiosity,
and because they're so visible. Sorry, go ahead.
The curiosity of the audience builds that aura around an enterprise. So it could be an actor, it could be an artist, it could be tomorrow a new venture by Apple's CEO has now launched a new business, and then there's a certain aura around it saying, what is Tim Cook's son going to do? So, so it's
got it.
It's a consumer problem.
Interesting perspective. So I don't know if Rahul is still there. Rahul, are you there, or did we lose you? Okay, so we've lost Rahul momentarily, so I think we'll come back to. So Sidharth, maybe I'll come back to you in terms of the question that I hinted at, which is that what were some of the lessons that you found that were common across all the 15 companies that you wrote about? Something interesting, but which were almost universal across all these companies.
So I mean, a lot of it, Hari, was my own. A reflection on my own journey, right? So one thing that really stood out, and which I thought of actually making the title of the book, was dumb luck plays a very large factor. Pure dumb luck, right? Right place, right time,
very underrated.
Things like pioneers, they say first mover advantage, but there's a contradiction to it. Pioneers often end up with arrows on their back, kind of stuff, right? Co-founder issues are real. People don't understand. I've been through highs and lows with my co-founder. I saw it in many of the stories. Some of them, some of the entrepreneurs requested me not to quote that part of the journey, but I think I've highlighted a few of them with their permission. So I mean, these two really stood out: dumb luck and co-founder issues being real, right? And some of it was actually funny conversations around VCs in the early days, right? I mean, with all due respect to Rahul being here, but I mean, like some mindless advice that some VCs gave to some of the entrepreneurs, right? I mean, there's one example of how the Book My Show founder Ashish Hemrajani was once told that you're into ticketing. Why don't you also do air tickets and train tickets and along with movie tickets, right? I mean, really stupid advice. And Sanjeev actually, because he was profitable almost from day one on the property business, he being told by a VC that you don't have a vision, that's why you're profitable, right? And sort of, I mean, no one in the new economy is supposed to get profitable so soon. Kind of, funny statements.
But, right. Not ambitious enough.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just tell me, this luck that you pointed out, no, I think it's quite underrated. So one question on this, which is sometimes I've also thought about this, which is, luck is very essential for runaway success. If you have to become super successful, luck plays a very important role. You can't claim that, I did these good things and it made me super successful. But ordinary success, is that also driven by luck? I would say above average success, or do other things come in? Talent, hard work, perseverance, all of those things also play a big role?
Of course it does, right? I mean, you need to have that, obviously the talent, and you need to put in hard work and stuff like that. I highlighted luck because I think it's the least spoken thing, right? It's a and I may attribute it to survivorship bias, right? I mean, just because you got to the other end of the spectrum,
correct,
you think
finish line,
meant to do it, right? I mean, I deserved it, or I was meant to do it, and you forget that a few things just played out which were not under your control, which is what luck is about, right? I'll give you an example. Monster acquiring Jobs Ahead in 2004 and then self-combusting as a unit played as a huge factor in Naukri's stupendous growth, right? And Sanjeev's admitted it in the book, right? Closer to Rahul's portfolio, Make My Trip and Yatra were almost neck to neck when the Lehman Brothers collapse happened, right? And Yatra's investors pulled back, whereas Make My Trip's investors said, no, just go for the kill now, go into an overdrive, right? And they created such a huge gap that Yatra could never catch up. So
Yatra could never catch up. True.
Yeah. So a lot of these factors, right? I mean, never get actually scripted in any story is what I felt. It really stood out for me.
Great. So Rahul, coming back to you, can you tell us a little bit about how Tiger and SoftBank have changed the, investing ecosystem? And by Tiger and SoftBank, they're just, representative of those big, bold investors, hedge funds.
Yeah. I think I can go back to an investment discussion we were having about a company which was called Ye Bhi. It was retailing shoes, one of the early apparel companies. It doesn't exist anymore, but the discussion was around what do we think the company will need in terms of cash to see itself reach cash flow break even. And the numbers we were getting to were somewhere in the $20-25 million. This is still 2009-10. And it seemed very doable amongst the group of 6-7 VCs in India. Suddenly the Flipkart financing happened in I think 2011. And that amount itself and the valuation was almost extraordinarily new and alien for us. How does a company so young get a valuation so much? How do they raise, I think maybe $10 million at that time? And that basically was the first blast of that what we are doing is seriously underestimating the cash needs for some businesses. And we could have actually burned through a lot more cash. We finally didn't invest in EAB, but we could have burned through a lot of cash, and we did in some cases by doing that, not really budgeting for or thinking through, the whole journey and what kind of cash requirements they are. What Tiger did to begin with was really clear that doubt that the market has to be created. Market is not going to be something we wait for and it will happen. And as VCs, not meeting enough. Now I think back, and I think there wasn't enough critical mass in 2006 of investor capital. Critical mass is needed to create markets. And again, it was beyond imagination that investor money could create a market. If you burn through enough, does a customer need arise? And by all conventional logic, that's unlikely to happen. But it happened in India. And it was.
It happened in China also.
It happened in China. In India, though, Hari, the only difference was that we were till 2011 sitting in an era of very low internet penetration. So it wasn't just the disposable income; it was also the connectivity. The digital footprint was so low that you couldn't imagine how people will get online. Redbus started around that time, and they, including Taxi for Sure, which started around that time, they had phone-in service. It wasn't do it on your app or go online to order. So we were still stuck with, hey, there is no digital footprint and we are throwing money. There is no courier service, there is no payment service, and we are building e-commerce. But enough capital showed up, one after the other. People just kept coming in, and it was almost a market creation. And then everybody else basically could build on top of that ecosystem. And SoftBank took this all to another level. I mean, their check sizes are so humongous that to some extent, what started happening, I wrote a little article on this. I'm still an egg, Mr. Investor. Too much late stage capital type investors started coming in too early. And Indian startups weren't getting enough time to build out, either a product market fit or even get a sense of, what's going to scale. And before they got there, they were still in their diapers. They got this, big investor coming in and treating them like adults. And they are no longer then allowed to say, hey, my product needs some serious fix because I'm leaking all my customers, or I have a terrible, grade of retention, or my CAC is so high, I'll never be able to build a, meaningful business. They were no longer allowed to say that. And then we saw this phase of collapses with, substantial capital having gone in. We saw some product failures. Tiny Owl, housing.com. These were product failures that happened because we were ahead of, time in terms of the expectation, but the reality was behind it. So I think there was this challenge that happened with this late stage capital coming in earlier and earlier. So, but back to, I think, this whole vision of building, for in an entrepreneur's mind, in a early stage VC's mind, Hari, it was, yes, there is a possibility that we can raise $150, $250 million. If we need to have global ambitions, if we keep growing, capital can come in. But it also, on the again flip side, is it created this two-horse race multiple times, from taxis to commerce. Two-horse races always meant that whoever got a tiger or a SoftBank, it almost became a defensive strategy because no other investor would touch the competition because they are not going to be called stupid for backing the other guys. And there have been multiple incidents of syndicates being built against the tiger syndicate, but not getting enough capital finally. So I think the writing on the wall became that capital becomes the determinant of success. And if one company gets it, the other one, either should think of, selling or shutting down. So the two-horse race basically was meant for getting in a tiger or a SoftBank.
Interesting. Great. One quick question, if you just answer this quickly. So you, Rahul, you've talked about, you passed on Paytm, you passed on Snapdeal. I think what made you, miss these things? And which brings us to the question, which is, what is VC investing like? Is it possible to recognize these stars at an early stage, or is it just you invest in some startups, pray and pray, as they call it, or is there some real science behind this?
I think horses for courses, Hari, I think if you don't understand the course, you can't identify the horse. So I think the 2008 to 11 timeframe, in my mind, is more of this, we don't know what the course is going to be like. So, an entrepreneur like Paytm in my case was really a matter of time. But like I told you earlier, we did miss it the second, third time, but it was still a questionable business. I think there was too much attention, and I've written this in my book also, there was too much attention to finding logic in the business.
Yeah.
Does the business model really make sense or not? But what you're not budgeting for as an early stage investor is the sheer energy and the problem solving that the entrepreneur is going to build. And then his ability to, like I said, this generation is more around pivoting and finding their way than being a one trick pony that the older generation was. So I think a lot of these misses happened because one, we were I think the market seemed like it's not there. We didn't anticipate a tiger to come in and create it. And second one was that it was too much logical reasoning on the business model, too much thinking. And not too much weightage for the entrepreneur's energy.
Right. Great. So Karthik, just coming back to you a little bit, can you talk of some of the most interesting incidents in your life and, spreading across everything that you've done, films to everything? What were some of the most interesting incidents, spread across the spectrum of things that you've been doing? That would be of interest. Benedict told me right at the beginning, even before I agreed to moderate this, that Karthik has some amazing incidents to share. And you should get the best out of him. I didn't know. I'm just asking you this openly.
No, I'm just going to hyperlink on what Rahul and Sidharth were talking about. I think the biggest thought that comes to me is that luck is, when success and failure is always cyclical. I mean, success will come and then failure will come, success will. But when success comes at the time when an entrepreneurship or an entrepreneur is ready for it, when it comes, when the entrepreneurship is ready for it, that's when it's luck. Because success at the wrong time is the worst thing that can happen to you. Like, just as an incident with respect to my own entrepreneurship, we were going to be invested in just before the pandemic. There was a very interesting investment opportunity of an entity that we had that was going to be bought. This was just before the pandemic, and we saw the way in which the industry of performing arts and live entertainment and digital entertainment has changed in the last 8 months. And today I'm so happy that we did not take that investment, because at this point of time, I'm riding a horse for which I don't want somebody else's investment driving me right now. And therefore, I have the opportunity to pivot 2021 on my terms. And I'm like, this is dumb luck that the pandemic came and the investment was kind of on freeze. And today I have the opportunity to rethink, saying, do I want that investment in the first place? So there are so many opportunities where an entrepreneur's emotional quotient is tested, because there are opportunities out there that you may not be ready for. And you need to take on opportunities that you are somewhere ready for, because otherwise you'll be riding a horse that you can't possibly handle. And success it can be fleeting and it can never come back to you if you're not able to control that flow of that opportunity that you're riding as such. So, I think my life is replete with such stories, and I'm sure that's the nature of entrepreneurship today. It is founder backed. It is dependent heavily on the shoulders of the people who are running that organization. And God damn it, I hope they're ready for the opportunities that lay before them. Because if they're not, it's going to hurt the entire enterprise and everything else. So.
But I'll come back to my original question to you in a moment. Karthik, think of something interesting that you can share with us. I'll go back to Sidharth in a moment. Sidharth, so you talked of the sci-fi story in your book that $10 billion of market cap erased so very quickly during the dot-com bust. I didn't even know that SIFI was a $10 billion company. I didn't know this. I don't know how many people know this. Can you just tell us a little bit about what happened, how the $10 billion valued company got built, what happened, how did it get, it evaporate overnight?
So, actually the most interesting story in the entire book for me was actually SIFI's, because even I didn't know much of it. I'd only heard of it, I remember that day in 99 at some point, I think middle of 1999, SIFI had acquired India World for almost 500 crores, right? And India World was owned a string of websites. The most prominent one was a one-page website called samachar.com. And basically nothing but collate headlines from all other websites all other Indian news websites and put it on one page, right? This is the pre-RSS feed era, right? And that was the simplest thing that they did. And it became one of the most trafficked websites for NRIs, mostly in the US, trying to catch up news and stuff like that, right? And the thing, that business was profitable. It was only 20, but I think they had reported profits of 27 lakhs, and then it got acquired by Sifi, and that's when I thought about it. I mean, that's when I learned about Sifi, and then of course they became an ISP, and then they became a consumer brand and all of that. But yeah, so it's a very interesting journey. So basically, what Ramraj told me, the founder of Sifi, is that he knew he was riding a tiger when the market cap hit actually $1.5 billion, right? And just 18 months ago, they had raised about $70 million at a 300 million valuation or something like that, right?
Wow.
Yeah, so he knew that he had the currency to make. He knew that this won't last, and he knew that. But he had the currency right now to make a real acquisition. So when the tide goes out, he has a, he has a really large revenue generating company, and he was looking at everything, right from telecom to whatever. And he set a benchmark of acquiring a company with at least 1,000 crores of revenues, right? So that even if the market crashes, he can go on building a real business based on that acquisition.
Yeah.
The screw up that he did, and he admits, is that he ended up not going to a banker for looking at the transaction. He actually got swayed by one of the fancy consulting companies, right? Who took him around the world. I mean, he was on a plane for 6 months, meeting all the partners all around of that consulting firm all around the world. But at the end of it, he had nothing to show for it. I mean, at the end of it, there was no deal, right? And in fact, he said that's actually one of the biggest regrets he has in his life, right? And then the market obviously crashed, and so much like every other large internet company, like the AOL Time Warner, merger was called off, the web van, Boo. So many companies shuttered. Obviously, their market cap actually fell to 70 million, the same amount of money that they had raised just about 18 months ago. Right?
Wow.
Yeah, so he squarely blames it on not going with a banker but a consulting firm. So yeah, that was his journey. It's pretty fascinating actually, and I didn't know about it. Which was a revelation.
So I don't think we have much more time. I'll just go through one or two questions. If you can just be quick about it, because I don't want to miss some of the interesting stuff that you guys have to share. So I think, Sidharth, I used to travel, to the US when I'm in the 3-year period from 2006 to 2009. And on one of the flights, I was with Ramalinga Raju. He's happened to be sitting next to me. And, I got into a conversation. He was waxing eloquent about the values on which Satyam was built. So I think you talked about a bit of Raju in your book as well. So what makes individuals like Raju do what he did?
I mean, it's above my weight class, honestly, to speak about this.
Nothing is above your weight class.
No, so I think one, of course, it's greed, right? It somewhere gets into a promoter's head or something like that. And second, I think is also peer pressure, right? I mean, he was competing with Infosys, Wipro, I'm guessing TCS, all of that. And then, you just want to look like you're always in the game and you're rubbing shoulders or whatever. Like I said, I don't know too much, and even Ramaraj didn't talk much about it. But I guess that's that.
Okay. Great. So, Karthik, coming back to you, any interesting anecdotes, stories that you have to share, which the audience would love?
I think one of the most interesting stories is the birth of one of our enterprises, which was largely stand-up comedy driven. And a lot of people today, watch stand-up comedy as a business right now. It flourishes because you receive a WhatsApp clip, you watch a YouTube channel, you will have a favorite stand-up comic right now who is able to present a point of view in a humorous way that you enjoy. We were a theater group, so which means that we used to do dramas and plays with 10 actors and 100 lights in an auditorium. And stand-up comedy came to us in 2009 before stand-up comedy entered into India, only because we had a play where we had no budget, no actors, and no script. and therefore the one actor had to write a play, which was an autobiography. It was a autobiographical piece, and it was a comedy piece.
Mm-hmm.
And we realized that we needed nothing more to tell a story than just one mic, one light, one actor, and their own script. And 3 years later, stand-up comedy became like the buzzword in India. And it came because we didn't have a budget for a play, and we had lost all our money burning on stupid plays which had 10 people and we didn't even need a stage and an auditorium. We went into pubs and performed. So that's how one of my most successful businesses was born.
Amazing. Great. So I'll have one last question for each of you. So Rahul, to start with you, in a minute or two, can you tell us about, Arkam, your investment theses? How did you figure out that Middle India is the next big thing that you need to address, is the next big opportunity?
Sure. So thanks, Hari, for the opportunity. So yeah, the new fund is called Arkam Ventures after Helion, and it's built to focus on the Middle India, not the top tier, not the bottom of the pyramid. Middle India, we believe, is the most underserved and the largest, and some of the biggest startup opportunities lie there because it gives a contiguous, massive market. We've seen a lot of scale issues, for startups focusing on top tier. They run out of space to run, and then try and pivot and re-innovate for the Middle India. We like founders who build for Middle India, but given its size, we feel that tech lends itself very well to giving scale. And the only way to win in Middle India is tech innovation. You cannot do what. But where we are coming from into this is that we have backed companies which have scaled and gone public on pure manpower strength, like Equitas, Spandana, and these are companies that introduce Middle India opportunity to us. So Middle India is what we call the sachet market, where people buy small unit quantities, but they will buy it millions of times. And the only way to profitably serve this customer segment is to have a tech backend where you don't incrementally spend money every time you're serving millions of orders at small order quantities. So we are very excited. We are done. We have made 6 investments in the space, ranging from agri-finance to health tech. And we're looking forward to the journey of continuing to back companies that focus on Middle India.
Great, Rahul. Wish you the very best and looking forward to your next book as well.
Thanks, Hari.
So
Thanks so
Sidharth,
much.
Yeah, great. Sidharth, one last question for you. I think, I have quoted you in my book, and that quote is largely about, your antipathy for the go big or go home, theme. So tell us a little bit about that. Sidharth, are you there?
Yeah, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes.
No, so I think it's something that I've struggled with personally, right? I mean, I've like I wrote a piece in Economic Times. I guess that's the one you're referring to.
Yes, that's the one.
Yeah, while I was continuing on my journey, I'd seen 2 waves of startups, right? The late 90s startups like Book My Show and Naukri and Bharat Matrimony and Make My Trip. Some of them, like I said, are good friends. And then the second time I saw it was, when Zomato, Flipkart, Swiggy, the 2008 era, right? And sitting on the sidelines, I actually used to feel miserable about what I had spent almost a decade then at, right? And it always bothered me that I'm not an A-list entrepreneur because I'm running a unsexy services cash and carry business, right?
Yeah.
And then I found my peace when I began to realize the odds against which some of these consumer startups work with, right? Like one of my closest friends would actually raise close to 100 crores, actually more than that, shut down his business after 10 years. He had literally nothing to show for it at home. Whereas a lot of my friends in the services side, I mean, some of them competitors, while we probably made 50, 60, 70 crores, right? We used to still think that, maybe we should have done a Book My Show. I could have done a Red Bus, blah, 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 right?
Yeah.
And it was then when it hit me that, we're doing just fine. Running a cash and carry business is not a bad business, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that was it. I mean, in the sense that there's so much of this media narrative around go big, go home, and all of that. kind of find it condescending, right? For people like me, right? So which is what that piece was, this narrative around the hype of startups versus, I mean, the so-called sexy startups versus sexy, labor-driven services business. Right?
Great. So Karthik, the last question for you: what would be your advice to wannabe entrepreneurs?
You live only once. You need to do that once in your life, and probably never again if you don't want to do it again. But don't live a life without trying to do that. So earn your own freedom. The space exists today. It's literally the norm right now. Entrepreneurship is becoming the norm. Try it once, but try it for the right reason. That's it.
Great. Thanks, Karthik. I wish you all the very best in all your endeavors. I'm sure you will continue to do wonderful new things.
Thank you so much.
Sidharth, for your next big gig, next big dream, wish you the best. And Rahul, obviously, for Arkam. And back to you, Sandeep and Pooja.
Thanks, Hari. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thanks. Can't hear you, Sandeep. I think you don't look to be on mute, but we can't hear you.
No, not it, Sandeep.
Yes.
Sandeep, are you good? Are you?
No, sometimes when you use the Bluetooth headset, at times it creates problem.
Okay. But I think to conclude, we had a really, I think it was a very insightful session for everyone. Lots of interesting things to take back. I think that whole thing about supporting your artistic integrity with entrepreneurial integrity, I think that's something a lot of people are going to take back. And you have so many people from a relatively artistic fraternity right here in the audience. So thank you so much, Hari. Thank you so much to all of you speakers. It's been wonderful having you. Thank you.